I found my wedding dress in a dumpster behind a Goodwill, stained with coffee grounds and ripped at the seam. 3 days before my wedding, my mother-in-law stood in my doorway with her arms crossed and said 5 words that changed everything. I did you a favor. What she didn't know was that the dress wasn't just fabric and lace. It was my grandmother's legacy, hand-sewn in 1952, passed down through 3 generations. And what she definitely didn't know was what I would do next would expose her for exactly who she was and change my life forever. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The call came at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, 3 days before I was supposed to marry her son. Jessica, you need to come over right now. Patricia's voice was sharp, demanding, never a request, always a command. That should have been my first warning. I drove to her house in my pajamas, still half asleep, thinking maybe there was an emergency with the flowers or the caterer, some last-minute wedding crisis I could help solve. When I pulled into her pristine driveway in Maple Ridge, she was already waiting by the front door, still in her silk robe, but her hair was perfectly styled, like she'd been up for hours. "Where is it?" I asked, stepping out of my car. "Where's what?" "My dress. You said you needed to see it for the final fitting adjustments." She smiled. Not warm, not apologetic, cold. "Oh, that old thing? I took care of it." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean, took care of it?" "I threw it out, dear. It was frankly embarrassing." "Did you really think I was going to let my son's bride walk down the aisle looking like she raided a costume shop?" The words hit me like ice water. I stood there in her driveway, morning air cutting through my thin pajamas, trying to process what she'd just said. "You threw out my wedding dress?" "I did you a favor, Jessica. I already ordered you a proper one from Kleinfeld. It'll be here tomorrow. Vera Wang. Very tasteful. Very appropriate for someone marrying into the Davidson family." That's when something inside me cracked. Not broke, cracked. Like the first hairline fracture in a window before it shatters completely. "Patricia, that dress belonged to my grandmother. It was made by hand in 1952. My mother wore it, my aunt wore it. It was the only thing I had left of her." Quote. She waved her hand dismissively. "Well, it looked like it. Ancient and outdated. Trust me, this is better." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there as the full weight of what she'd done settled over me. She had thrown away a piece of my family's history like it was garbage. Because it didn't meet her standards. Because I didn't meet her standards. Where is it now? Gone. Goodwill pickup was yesterday. I got back in my car without another word. But as I drove away, I could see her in my rearview mirror, still standing in her doorway, watching me leave with that same cold smile. What I didn't know then was that this wasn't the beginning of our problems. This was just the moment I finally saw them clearly. Looking back, the signs were everywhere. I just kept making excuses for them. It started the first time Ryan brought me home to meet his parents. I was 24, fresh out of college, wearing a sundress I'd bought specially for the occasion. Nothing fancy, just a simple blue cotton dress with tiny white flowers. I thought I looked nice. Patricia opened the door, looked me up and down, and said, "Oh, you're shorter than I expected." Then she turned to Ryan. "Didn't you say she was in fashion? I was expecting someone more polished." I laughed it off. First impressions, right? Everyone gets nervous. When we got engaged 2 years later, she insisted on throwing the engagement party. "You don't have the connections, dear," she explained. "The Davidson family has a reputation to maintain." I watched her plan an entire party around what she wanted, not what we wanted. The guest list was her friends from the country club. The menu was her favorite caterer. Even the decorations were her choice. Elegant white and gold. Very sophisticated. Very her. When someone asked about my preferences, she'd smile and say, "Jessica has such unique taste. We're keeping things classic instead." But it was the smaller moments that really stung. The way she'd correct me in front of people. "Oh, Jessica, you pronounced that wrong. It's C-A-H-N-A-H, pay, not canapé." The way she'd buy me clothes for my birthday that were completely wrong for my style, then act hurt when I didn't wear them. I guess I just don't understand your generation's fashion sense. During wedding planning, it got worse. She questioned everything. The venue wasn't prestigious enough. The photographer wasn't experienced enough. The flowers weren't sophisticated enough. Every suggestion I made was met with a gentle smile and a better idea that was really just her idea. Sweetie, I know you love daisies, but they're so casual. Roses are much more elegant for a Davidson wedding. A backyard reception sounds lovely, but what will people think? The Morrison family had their daughter's wedding at the country club last month. We can't look like we're struggling. Ryan always took her side. Mom just wants everything to be perfect, he'd say. She's got good taste. Maybe we should listen to her. I started to feel like a guest at my own wedding, like I was being fitted for a role in their family, instead of joining it. But every time I tried to push back, Patricia would get that look. Wounded, disappointed, like I was being unreasonable. I'm just trying to help, Jessica. I've been planning parties for 25 years. But if you don't want my input... And then Ryan would give me that look, the one that said, please don't upset my mother. So I kept compromising, kept adjusting, kept telling myself that once we were married, things would be different. She'd see me as family then. She'd respect my choices. The dress was supposed to be my one non-negotiable, the one thing that was truly mine. I should have known better. 3 months before the wedding, I brought it to her house for what I thought would be a sweet moment, showing her my grandmother's dress, telling her the story behind it. How my grandmother, Elena Martinez, had sewn every bead by hand during the winter of 1952. How she'd embroidered tiny roses along the hem with thread she'd saved up to buy. How 3 generations of women in my family had worn it on their happiest day. Patricia examined it like it was evidence in a crime scene, held it up to the light, turned it this way and that, her face growing more disapproving by the second. Well, she said finally, it's certainly vintage. The way she said vintage made it sound like a disease. I was hoping you could help me with some minor alterations, I said. Maybe take it in a little at the waist? Jessica, honey. She set the dress down like it might contaminate her furniture. This dress is from another era. The style is completely outdated. The fabric is, well, it's seen better days. Are you sure this is really what you want to wear to marry my son? I felt my cheeks burn. It's been in my family for 70 years, Patricia. It means everything to me. I understand that, dear, but think about the photographs. Think about how it will look next to Ryan in his custom tuxedo. Think about what our guests will say. What will they say? She paused, like she was choosing her words carefully. They'll wonder why the Davidson family couldn't afford to buy their son's bride a proper wedding dress. That night I called my mother in tears. She hates it, Mom. She thinks it makes me look poor. Honey, my mother said gently, that woman has been trying to remake you since the day you met her. The dress isn't the problem. You not being who she wants you to be is the problem. I knew she was right. But I was 3 months away from marrying the man I loved, and I didn't want to start a war with his family. So I convinced myself that Patricia would come around. That once she saw me in the dress on the wedding day, she'd understand why it mattered. I never imagined she'd make sure I never got the chance to wear it at all. I spent the next 6 hours driving to every Goodwill in a 50-mile radius. The first 3 locations were dead ends. The staff looked at me with pity as I described my grandmother's dress, how it had lace sleeves and pearl buttons, how it was probably covered in coffee grounds by now. They checked their recent donations, looked in the back rooms, even called other stores. Nothing. At the 4th Goodwill in Riverside, a woman named Margaret was working the donation sorting area. She was probably in her 70s, with kind eyes and hands that moved gently through the donated clothes, like she understood that each piece had a story. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. A 1950s wedding dress? She asked. Hand sewn with rose embroidery? My heart jumped. Yes, that's it. Do you have it? Her face fell. Oh, honey, I remember that dress. It came in yesterday with a load of donations. But it was in such bad condition. Stained. Torn. We had to put it in the discard pile. The discard pile? Items too damaged to sell go to textile recycling. But, she paused, studying my face. It meant something to you, didn't it? I started crying right there in the middle of goodwill. Not gentle tears, but the kind of sobbing that comes from somewhere deep and desperate. Margaret stepped around the counter and put her arm around me. Tell me about the dress, she said softly. So I did. I told her about my grandmother, Elena, who had immigrated from Mexico with nothing but dreams and determination. How she'd worked as a seamstress to put my grandfather through night school. How she'd saved every penny for months to buy the silk and lace for her wedding dress, sewing it by candlelight after 12-hour days at the factory. I told her how my grandmother had worn it to marry my grandfather in a small ceremony at St. Mary's. How my mother had altered it in 1978, adding her own touches while keeping Elena's original vision. How my Aunt Rosa had worn it in 1995, and how I dreamed of wearing it since I was a little girl playing dress-up in my mother's closet. Margaret listened without interruption, her eyes growing softer with each detail. And your future mother-in-law threw it away, she said when I finished. She said it was ugly, embarrassing, that it would make the Davidson family look poor. Margaret was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that changed everything. Child, that woman didn't throw away a dress. She threw away your heritage, your family's love, your connection to the women who came before you. She threw away everything that makes you who you are because it didn't fit her idea of who you should be. The words hit me like a physical blow because they were so perfectly, devastatingly true. Come with me, Margaret said. She led me through the back of the store, past racks of sorted donations, to a large dumpster behind the building. My heart sank. If the dress was in there, buried under bags of discarded items, it was truly gone. But Margaret didn't stop at the dumpster. She led me to a small building next to it. This is where we keep items for textile recycling before pickup, she explained, unlocking the door. If your dress is anywhere, it's in here. The room was dark and smelled like old fabric and dust. Margaret turned on a single light bulb, and I saw piles of clothes sorted into bins. She walked to one marked damaged formal wear and started lifting items out carefully. And then she held it up. My grandmother's dress, stained with coffee grounds and what looked like ketchup. The left sleeve was torn at the shoulder seam. The hem was muddy and frayed. But it was there. The pearl buttons still caught the light. The rose embroidery still bloomed along the neckline in Elena's careful stitches. I reached for it with shaking hands. Oh, honey, Margaret whispered. Look what they did to it. I held the dress against my chest and, for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. It was damaged, yes, but it was still here. It was still mine. Can it be saved? I asked. Margaret examined it with the eye of someone who'd spent decades working with fabric. The stains might come out with the right treatment. The tear can be mended. It'll take work, but... She looked up at me. This dress has survived 70 years. It's not giving up without a fight. That's when I knew what I had to do. Margaret, I said, I need your help. Not just with the dress. With everything. She smiled. What did you have in mind? Margaret became my secret ally. And my saving grace. For the next 3 days, we worked together in the back room of the Goodwill, treating my grandmother's dress like a patient in the emergency room. Margaret had connections I never knew existed. A dry cleaner who specialized in vintage fabrics, a seamstress who worked with historical costumes for the theater, even a woman who restored antique textiles for museums. Your future mother-in-law made one critical mistake, Margaret said as we gently soaked the dress in a solution designed to lift the stains. She assumed you'd just accept what she did. She assumed you'd be grateful for her better option. The coffee grounds came out easier than we expected. The ketchup stain required 3 different treatments, but it faded to almost nothing. The mud on the hem actually brushed off once the fabric dried. The tear in the sleeve was more complex, but Margaret's seamstress friend, a woman named Carmen who'd been working with vintage clothing for 30 years, managed to repair it so perfectly you could barely see where it had been damaged. This is incredible work, Carmen said, examining the dress under her magnifying light. The stitching, the beadwork, the way the lace is attached. Your grandmother was a true artist. By Friday afternoon, the day before my wedding, the dress looked better than it had in decades. Not new. It still carried the patina of age, the soft weight of history. But it was beautiful, it was whole, it was exactly what I wanted to wear to marry the man I loved. But something else had changed during those 3 days. Something inside me. Every time Patricia called asking about dress fittings for the Vera Wang gown she'd ordered, I let it go to voicemail. When Ryan asked why I seemed distant, I just smiled and said I was handling wedding details. I wasn't ready to tell him what his mother had done. Not yet. I had a different plan. Margaret helped me with that too. Sometimes, she said, the best way to handle a bully is to let them reveal themselves in front of everyone who matters. Saturday morning, 2 hours before the ceremony, I got the call I was expecting. Jessica, where are you? Patricia's voice was sharp with panic. The hair and makeup team is here, but you're not, and the dress delivery was supposed to be an hour ago. I'm getting ready at my mother's house, I said calmly. As planned. But the Vera Wang dress is here, at my house. You need to come here for final preparations. Actually, Patricia, I won't be needing that dress. Silence. Then, what do you mean? I found my grandmother's dress. I had it restored. I'll be wearing it today, as originally planned. The explosion was immediate. Absolutely not. I will not have you embarrass this family by wearing that old rag. Ryan will not allow this. Patricia, I said, my voice steady in a way that surprised even me. I'm not asking for permission. I'm telling you what's going to happen. You cannot be serious. That dress is completely inappropriate for a Davidson wedding. What will people think? They'll think I'm honoring my family's heritage while joining yours. I forbid it. And that's when I said the words I'd been practicing for 3 days. You don't get to forbid anything anymore, Patricia. You overplayed your hand when you threw away something that didn't belong to you, something irreplaceable, something sacred to my family. Another silence. Longer this time. I was trying to help you, she said, her voice smaller now. No, you were trying to erase me. To make me into the daughter-in-law you wanted, instead of accepting the one you got. But here's what you didn't count on. I'm stronger than you thought. And I have people in my corner who see my worth. I hung up before she could respond. An hour later, I was standing in my childhood bedroom, looking at myself in the mirror. My mother was behind me, tears in her eyes, fastening the pearl buttons that my grandmother had sewn on by hand 70 years ago. You look exactly like her, my mother whispered, like Elena on her wedding day. The dress fit perfectly, not just my body, but my soul. This was who I was meant to be. Not the polished, country club version Patricia wanted, but myself. Connected to my past, confident in my present, ready for my future. My phone buzzed. A text from Ryan. Mom says there's a problem with your dress. She's really upset. Can we talk? I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I typed back, see you at the altar. We'll talk after. Because some conversations are too important to have over text. Some truths are too big for phone calls. Sometimes, you have to let your actions speak first. And let the words follow. What Patricia didn't know was that half the wedding guests had heard the story of my grandmother's dress during the engagement party. How she'd hand-sewn every bead, how 3 generations of women had worn it, how much it meant to me. They were expecting to see it. And they were about to get a much bigger show than anyone had planned. The church was packed. 300 guests from both families, all dressed in their Saturday best. All waiting to see the Davidson family wedding of the year. I waited in the back of the church with my father, listening to the string quartet play the processional music. Through the small window in the door, I could see Patricia in the front row, wearing navy blue silk and a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. She kept glancing toward the back of the church, then checking her phone. Ryan stood at the altar in his custom tuxedo, looking nervous but happy. He still didn't know what had happened with the dress. He still didn't know what his mother had done. The music changed to the bridal march. It was time. The doors opened, and I stepped into view. The reaction was immediate and unmistakable. A wave of admiration rippled through the congregation. I heard whispers of, beautiful, stunning, just like her grandmother. Patricia's sister, Aunt Dorothy, actually gasped out loud. But the most telling reaction came from Patricia herself. She turned in her seat, saw me walking down the aisle, and her face went completely white. Not embarrassed white, not angry white, shocked white. Because in that moment, in front of 300 people, she realized she'd made a catastrophic error in judgment. The dress didn't look old or outdated or embarrassing. It looked timeless, elegant, perfect. I walked down that aisle feeling like a queen. Not because of the dress, but because of what it represented. My choice, my heritage, my refusal to be diminished. Ryan's face when he saw me was everything I'd hoped for. Pure joy, love, wonder. He whispered, "You're incredible," when I reached the altar, and I could see in his eyes that he truly meant it. The ceremony was beautiful. Traditional vows, heartfelt readings, everything Patricia had planned to perfection. But the real drama came afterward, during the reception. I was greeting guests during the cocktail hour when Mrs. Holloway, one of Patricia's oldest friends from the country club, approached me with her husband. "Jessica, darling, you look absolutely radiant," she said. "That dress is exquisite. Patricia told me it's a family heirloom?" "Yes," I said. "It belonged to my grandmother. She made it by hand in 1952. "How wonderful." Patricia was so excited about it when she called yesterday. She said she'd helped you restore it after it was damaged. So thoughtful of her to connect you with the right people. I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. "I'm sorry?" "Oh yes, she was telling everyone about the specialist dry cleaner she found, the seamstress who did the repairs. She was so proud to be part of preserving your family's history." Behind Mrs. Holloway, I could see Patricia watching our conversation, her smile frozen in place. "That's not exactly what happened," I said carefully. But Mrs. Holloway had already moved on, praising the flower arrangements and asking about our honeymoon plans. For the next hour, I had the same conversation over and over, guest after guest congratulating Patricia on her role in saving my dress, on her wonderful idea to have it professionally restored, on how lucky I was to have such a thoughtful mother-in-law who went above and beyond to make sure I could wear my family heirloom. Patricia had spent the morning doing damage control, spinning the story to make herself the hero instead of the villain. I watched her work the room, accepting praise for something she'd actively tried to destroy, watching her friends beam at her generosity and sensitivity to my family's traditions. And that's when I realized this wasn't over. This was just beginning. During the dinner, Patricia stood up to give her mother of the groom speech. She talked about Ryan's accomplishments, about how proud she was, about how excited the family was to welcome me. "And I have to say," she concluded, "how touched I was to be part of preserving Jessica's beautiful family heirloom. When we realized her grandmother's dress needed professional restoration, I was honored to help connect her with the right specialists. Because that's what family does for each other. We preserve what matters. We honor the past while building the future." The applause was warm and genuine. Patricia glowed under the attention, basking in praise for her kindness and thoughtfulness. She looked directly at me as she sat down, her message clear. "I've controlled the narrative. You can't touch me now." But what Patricia didn't know was that Margaret was sitting at table 12. And Margaret had brought friends. 3 days after the wedding, while Ryan and I were supposed to be on our honeymoon in Tuscany, I was instead sitting in a lawyer's office in downtown Phoenix. Not for divorce papers, for something much more important. Margaret had introduced me to Sarah Chen, an attorney who specialized in cases involving destruction of personal property and emotional distress. But more importantly, Sarah understood the cultural and emotional significance of family heirlooms. "What your mother-in-law did wasn't just throwing away a dress," Sarah explained. "It was the destruction of irreplaceable cultural property. In some states, there are specific laws protecting family heirlooms and items of cultural significance." I wasn't interested in suing Patricia. I was interested in something bigger. "I want to start a foundation," I told Sarah, "for people whose family heirlooms have been lost, stolen, or destroyed by people who didn't understand their value." Margaret, who'd driven down for the meeting, squeezed my hand. "Tell her about the others." Quote, "In the weeks after my wedding, word had spread about what Patricia had done and what Margaret and I had accomplished in restoring my dress. People started reaching out. A woman whose mother-in-law had accidentally donated her grandmother's quilt. A man whose stepfather had thrown away his late father's military medals. A bride whose sister had ruined her mother's vintage jewelry as a prank. All of them had the same story. Someone in their family had decided their heritage wasn't valuable enough to preserve. We could call it the Elena Foundation, I said. After my grandmother, we'd help people restore damaged heirlooms, but also educate families about the importance of preserving cultural heritage. Sarah smiled. That's not a small undertaking. Do you have the resources for something like that? I thought about the Vera Wang dress still hanging in Patricia's closet, tags attached. The dress that cost more than most people make in a month. The dress that was supposed to replace something priceless with something expensive. I'm getting divorced, I said quietly. Both women looked at me in surprise. From Ryan? Margaret asked. No, from the idea that I have to accept being treated badly to keep peace in the family. I took a deep breath. Ryan stood by and watched his mother try to erase my heritage. Even after I told him what she'd done, his response was, "She meant well. Can't you just let it go?" The conversation with Ryan had happened on our second night in Italy. I'd finally told him the whole story, how his mother had thrown away my dress, how I'd found it in a dumpster, how she'd lied to everyone about helping me restore it. His response, "Mom can be difficult, but she loves you. She was probably just trying to help in her own way." Ryan, I'd said, she threw away something irreplaceable that belonged to my family, then she lied about it to save face. But everything worked out, right? You got the dress restored, it looked beautiful, everyone loved it. That's when I knew he would never see it. He would never understand that this wasn't about the dress being salvageable. It was about his mother trying to destroy something sacred to me, and him thinking that was acceptable as long as it worked out. I can't build a life with someone who thinks my pain is negotiable, I told Sarah, who thinks destroying my heritage is forgivable if the end result looks good. 6 months later, the Elena Foundation was official. We'd helped restore over 50 family heirlooms and educated hundreds of families about the importance of preserving cultural heritage. Margaret became our head of community outreach. Carmen, the seamstress who'd repaired my dress, joined as our restoration specialist. Patricia tried to contact me twice. Once through Ryan's lawyer during the divorce proceedings, claiming I was being dramatic and that she'd learned her lesson. Once directly, after the foundation was featured in a local newspaper article, saying she wanted to make amends and possibly get involved with our work. I never responded to either message. But I did frame the letter we received from Maria Santos, a woman in Denver, whose son's girlfriend had thrown away her late husband's immigration documents, including the citizenship papers he'd carried for 47 years. We'd connected her with a document restoration specialist who was able to save them. "You gave me back my husband's legacy," Maria wrote. "You gave me back proof that his struggle mattered, that our story mattered. Thank you for understanding that some things are worth more than money." That letter hangs in my office now, next to a photo of my grandmother Elena in her wedding dress, taken on her wedding day in 1952. I still have the dress. I had it professionally preserved and displayed in a custom case at the foundation's office. Not because I want to live in the past, but because I want other people to see that family heritage is worth fighting for. Sometimes people ask me if I regret how things turned out, if I wish I'd handled Patricia differently, if I miss being part of the Davidson family. The answer is simple. You can't miss something you never really had. Patricia never saw me as family. She saw me as a project. Something to be improved, refined, made acceptable for her standards. When I refused to be reshaped, she tried to erase the parts of me that didn't fit her vision. But here's what I learned from Margaret, from Elena's dress, from all the families we've helped through the foundation. Your heritage isn't negotiable. Your worth isn't up for debate. And you don't have to earn the right to be treated with respect. If someone in your life is trying to convince you that your family's history doesn't matter, that your traditions are embarrassing, that you need to be improved to be acceptable, they're not trying to help you. They're trying to control you. You don't have to accept that. You don't have to be grateful for disrespect. You don't have to choose between your heritage and your future. You can honor where you came from while building where you're going. You can preserve what matters while letting go of what doesn't serve you. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to disappear. My name is Jessica Martina Santos now. I kept my maiden name and added my grandmother's. because some stories are too important to let other people erase. And if someone tries to throw away your story, remember, it's not really gone until you stop fighting for it. Fight for it. It's worth it. You're worth it. Your heritage is not garbage. Your traditions are not embarrassing. Your family's love is not outdated. And anyone who tries to convince you otherwise doesn't deserve a place at your table. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.